Welcome to After Dark Chronicles, where the real stories come out. When the sun goes down, the truth comes up. Tonight's story. A software engineer let his college friend move in as a roommate to help him out. For 2 years, he thought they were friends. He trusted him. He helped him get a job at his company. He introduced him to his girlfriend. Then he discovered the truth. His roommate had been systematically destroying his life, stealing his work, sabotaging his career, sleeping with his girlfriend, and planning to use stolen code worth millions to start his own company. So he didn't just get revenge. He got the FBI involved. He got lawyers involved. And he made sure his former roommate would never work in tech again. This is the story of the most calculated professional destruction you'll ever hear. This is his story. This story comes from Reddit, posted by a 34-year-old software engineer who learned that sometimes the person eating your food and sleeping on your couch is the one stealing your entire future. Here's what he wrote. My name is Daniel. I'm 34 years old. I work as a senior software engineer at a major tech company in San Francisco. I've been coding since I was 12. It's not just my job, it's my passion. I build things, complex systems, algorithms, solutions to problems most people don't even know exist. And I'm good at it. Really good. 3 years ago, I was working on something big, a proprietary machine learning algorithm for data compression. Sounds boring, but it wasn't. This algorithm could reduce file sizes by 70% with zero quality loss. The applications were massive. Cloud storage, streaming services, enterprise data management, millions of dollars in potential licensing deals. My company knew it was valuable. They'd given me a small team and significant resources to develop it. I was the lead. It was my baby. I'd been working on it for 18 months when everything fell apart. But let me back up. 2 years before the disaster, my college roommate Jake reached out. We'd been friends in college. Not super close, but friendly. We'd lost touch after graduation. He sent me a message on LinkedIn saying he'd moved to San Francisco and was struggling to find work in tech. Asked if I knew of any openings. I felt bad for him. The San Francisco rental market is brutal. Tech jobs are competitive. So I did him a favor. 2 favors, actually. First, I told him he could crash at my place until he got on his feet. I had a 2-bedroom apartment. The second room was my home office, but I could work from the living room for a while. Second, I referred him to my company. Entry-level developer position. Nothing fancy, but it paid decent and got his foot in the door. Jake was grateful. Said I was saving his life. He moved in with the promise it would be temporary. 3 months tops. 3 months turned into 6. 6 turned into a year. Jake always had an excuse. He needed to save more money. Rents were too high. He was waiting for the right place. I didn't push it. He was paying rent, splitting utilities, keeping the place clean. It was fine. We got along. We'd grab beers after work, play video games on weekends. It felt like college again. I even introduced him to my girlfriend, Emily. She worked in marketing at a different tech company. We'd been dating for about a year when Jake moved in. She liked him, thought he was funny and smart. The 3 of us would hang out sometimes. Dinners, movies, normal friend stuff. Everything seemed fine, but it wasn't fine. It was a carefully constructed lie, and I was too trusting to see it. The first sign something was wrong came about 18 months after Jake moved in. I was working late at the office on the compression algorithm. There was a critical bug I couldn't figure out. I'd been staring at code for hours when I decided to check the version history to see if I'd accidentally broken something in a recent commit. That's when I noticed something strange. Code commits under my name, from my account. At times when I wasn't even at my computer. Late nights, weekends, times when I was provably somewhere else. I pulled up the detailed logs. The commits were coming from my home IP address. My stomach dropped. Someone was accessing my work account from my apartment. There was only one other person who had access to my apartment. Jake. I didn't confront him immediately. I needed to be sure, so I set up a hidden camera in my home office. Just a small webcam pointed at my desk. Motion activated, saving footage to a cloud account Jake didn't know about. Then I went to work the next day like nothing was wrong. That night I stayed late at the office. Told Jake I'd be home around midnight. At 9 p.m. I checked the camera feed from my phone, and there he was. Jake, sitting at my personal computer, my work laptop open next to him. He was going through my files, my code, my proprietary algorithm documentation. He was copying everything to an external hard drive. I watched for 20 minutes. He was methodical, professional. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing. He knew exactly what he was looking for. He'd done this before, many times before. I sat in my car outside the office and tried to process what I'd just seen. My roommate, my friend, the guy I'd helped get a job, the guy I'd let live in my apartment for over a year. He was stealing my work, my intellectual property, code that my company owned, code that was worth millions. I wanted to storm home and confront him, but something told me to wait, to gather more evidence. So I did. Over the next 2 weeks I collected everything. Video footage of Jake accessing my computer 15 different times. Logs showing him copying gigabytes of data. Screenshots of him accessing my company's internal repositories using credentials he shouldn't have had. He'd installed a keylogger on my home computer months ago. That's how he got my passwords. I documented everything. Timestamps, file transfers, the whole thing. Then I hired a private investigator. I needed to know what Jake was planning to do with my stolen code. The PI followed him for a week. What he discovered made my blood boil. Jake had been meeting with venture capitalists. He was pitching a startup idea, a revolutionary data compression algorithm. Sound familiar? He'd created a whole pitch deck, business plan, technical specifications, all based on my work. He was telling investors he'd developed this breakthrough technology and was looking for seed funding to build a company around it. He'd already had 3 meetings. One VC firm was seriously interested. They were talking about a $2 million seed round. But that wasn't even the worst part. The PI also discovered that Jake had been sleeping with Emily, my girlfriend, for 6 months. They'd been meeting at hotels, his car, even our apartment, when I was traveling for work. The PI had photos, timestamps, everything. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My roommate wasn't just stealing my work. He was stealing my girlfriend. He was systematically taking everything I had, and he was doing it with a smile on his face, acting like my friend, drinking my beer, eating my food, sleeping under my roof, all while planning to destroy my career and steal the woman I loved. I could have confronted them, could have kicked Jake out, could have broken up with Emily, but that felt too small, too easy. This wasn't just about hurt feelings or a broken friendship. This was theft, corporate espionage. Jake had stolen intellectual property worth millions of dollars. He was planning to build a company on my work, to profit from years of my research and development. If he succeeded, he wouldn't just be rich. He'd destroy my reputation. Because when his company launched with his algorithm that looked exactly like mine, people would think I stole from him, or that we'd collaborated and I was trying to cut him out. My career would be over. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Jake. I was going to destroy him, completely, legally, publicly. I started by contacting my company's legal department. I showed them everything. The video footage, the file transfer logs, the keylogger evidence, the VC pitch deck Jake had created using our proprietary technology. My company's lawyers were livid. This wasn't just theft. This was a federal crime. Theft of trade secrets, computer fraud, unauthorized access to protected systems. They immediately contacted the FBI. 2 agents came to my apartment the next day while Jake was at work. I gave them everything. They were very interested. They said cases like this, where there's clear evidence of trade secret theft with intent to commercialize, are taken extremely seriously. They asked if I'd be willing to cooperate with an investigation. I said absolutely. The FBI set up a sting operation. They wanted to catch Jake in the act of trying to sell the stolen technology, so they had an undercover agent pose as an investor. The agent reached out to Jake, saying they'd heard about his revolutionary compression algorithm through the VC grapevine and wanted to meet. Jake took the bait. He agreed to a meeting. The FBI wired the meeting location, recorded everything. Jake showed up with his laptop, his pitch deck, and my stolen code. He spent 45 minutes explaining his algorithm to the undercover agent, talking about how he'd developed it, how it was going to change the industry, how he was looking for $2 million in seed funding in exchange for 15% equity. The agent asked technical questions. Jake answered them, using my research, my documentation, my work. At the end of the meeting, the agent said they were very interested. They wanted to move forward. Could Jake send over the technical specifications and some code samples? Jake said absolutely. He'd send everything over by the end of the week. The agent shook his hand, said they'd be in touch. Jake left the meeting thinking he was about to become a multi-millionaire. 3 days later, FBI agents arrested him at our apartment. I was at work when it happened. My company's head of security called me, said the FBI had executed a search warrant at my residence, and Jake had been taken into custody. They'd seized his laptop, his external hard drives, his phone, everything. I drove home. There were still agents there, cataloging evidence. They told me Jake had been charged with theft of trade secrets, computer fraud and abuse, and wire fraud, federal charges. If convicted, he was looking at up to 10 years in prison and massive fines. Emily called me that night. She'd heard about Jake's arrest. She was crying, asking what happened. I said, "You should ask your boyfriend." She went silent. Then she said, "How did you know?" I said, "I've known for 2 weeks. I have photos. The private investigator I hired documented everything." She started apologizing, saying it was a mistake, that she loved me, that Jake had manipulated her. I said, "I don't care. We're done. Don't contact me again." I hung up, blocked her number. I never spoke to her again. Jake's arrest made the local news. Tech worker arrested for stealing trade secrets worth millions. His mugshot was everywhere. His name, his face. The articles detailed how he'd stolen proprietary technology from his employer and tried to sell it to investors. His LinkedIn got flooded with messages. People calling him a thief, a fraud. His family found out. His parents, his younger sister. Everyone he knew saw the news, saw what he'd done. His lawyer reached out to me, wanted to talk, wanted to work something out. I told my lawyer to tell his lawyer to go fuck himself. There was no deal, no settlement. This was going to trial, and I was going to testify. My company also filed a civil lawsuit against Jake, seeking damages for theft of intellectual property, breach of employment contract. The lawsuit asked for $5 million. Jake didn't have $5 million. He didn't have $5,000. But that didn't matter. The point was to make sure he'd never financially recover, even if he declared bankruptcy. Certain judgments stick with you forever. The case took 8 months to go to trial. During that time, Jake lost his job. Obviously, he was fired the day he was arrested. He lost his apartment, couldn't make rent without income. He moved back in with his parents in Ohio. A 32-year-old facing federal charges, unemployed, living in his childhood bedroom. His reputation in the tech industry was destroyed. Nobody would hire him. His name was radioactive. The trial lasted 2 weeks. I testified for 6 hours over 2 days. I walked the jury through everything. How I developed the algorithm, how Jake had stolen it, the video evidence, the keylogger, the VC meetings, the FBI sting. Jake's lawyer tried to argue that since we were roommates and friends, I'd shared the code with him, that it was a collaboration, that the theft charges were overblown. The prosecutor destroyed that argument. They showed the video of Jake sneaking into my office when I wasn't home, the logs showing he'd stolen the code at 3 a.m., the pitch deck where he claimed sole credit, the undercover meeting where he never once mentioned my name. It was clear, this wasn't collaboration, this was theft. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They found Jake guilty on all counts: theft of trade secrets, computer fraud, wire fraud. The judge sentenced him to 5 years in federal prison. He also ordered Jake to pay restitution, $3.2 million to my company for damages, plus legal fees, plus fines. Jake's lawyer asked for leniency, said his client had made a terrible mistake, but wasn't a violent criminal. The judge said, "Your client didn't just steal code. He stole years of research and development. He tried to build a company on someone else's work while betraying someone who'd helped him. This wasn't a mistake. This was calculated fraud." 5 years. Jake was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. His mother was crying in the gallery. His father looked broken. I felt nothing. The civil case settled a month later. Jake obviously couldn't pay the $5 million, but the judgment was entered against him anyway. His wages would be garnished for the rest of his life. Any assets he ever acquired could be seized. He'd never own a home, never have savings. He'd be paying off that debt until he died. As for Emily, I heard she'd moved to New York. New job, new boyfriend. Good for her. I hope they were happy. I didn't waste energy thinking about her. She'd made her choice. My focus was on my work. My company promoted me after the trial. Senior architect. Big raise. Big bonus. They were grateful I'd protected their intellectual property and cooperated with law enforcement. The compression algorithm I developed eventually got licensed to 3 major companies, generated over $20 million in revenue. I got a percentage of that, not huge, but enough to buy a house, pay off my student loans, invest in my future. Jake served 3 years of his 5-year sentence. Got out early for good behavior. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he was working at a call center in Ohio, making $15 an hour, living with his parents still. He tried to get back into tech, but nobody would touch him. A federal conviction for trade secret theft is a career death sentence in Silicon Valley. His LinkedIn had been deleted. His GitHub account was gone. Every trace of his professional existence had been wiped clean. He was a ghost, a cautionary tale. The guy who threw away his entire future because he got greedy. I ran into someone who knew Jake's family about a year after he got out of prison. They told me Jake had tried to reach out, wanted to apologize, wanted to explain himself. I told them I wasn't interested. There was nothing he could say that would change what he did. No apology would give me back the 2 years I spent trusting someone who was actively destroying my life. No explanation would justify stealing my work and sleeping with my girlfriend while eating my food and living under my roof. Jake made his choices. He chose to betray me. He chose to steal from me. He chose to try to build his future on my work, and he paid the price. 5 years in federal prison, a criminal record, a destroyed reputation, a lifetime of debt, and the knowledge that everyone he knows, everyone he'll ever meet, can Google his name and see exactly what kind of person he is. Some people say, I went too far, that I should have just kicked him out and moved on, that getting the FBI involved was extreme, that ruining his entire life was cruel. But here's what those people don't understand. Jake didn't just steal code. He stole years of my life, years of research, late nights, weekends, sacrifices. He tried to take credit for my work, to profit from my talent, to destroy my career while pretending to be my friend. If I'd just kicked him out, he would have tried again, with someone else, at some other company. He'd proven he was willing to betray anyone for money. The only way to stop him was to make sure he could never do it again. And I did. Jake will never work in tech again. He'll never be trusted with proprietary information. He'll spend the rest of his life paying off a debt he'll never clear. And every potential employer, every background check, every Google search will show exactly who he is. A thief, a liar, a fraud. That's not revenge. That's justice. But the story doesn't end with Jake's conviction. Because what happened over the next 3 years revealed layers of betrayal I never could have imagined. And by the time it was over, Jake wasn't the only one who'd lost everything. 6 months after Jake went to prison, I got a call from the FBI agent who'd worked on the case. Agent Morrison. He said they needed to talk. Said there were some developments. I met him at a coffee shop downtown. He looked serious. He said, we've been monitoring Jake's communications from prison. He's been in contact with someone on the outside. Someone who was helping him plan the theft before he got arrested. My stomach dropped. I said, who? He said, we're not sure yet, but we think there might have been a bigger conspiracy than we originally thought. Over the next few weeks, the FBI investigation expanded. They started looking at Jake's financial records more closely. His emails, his text messages. What they found was disturbing. Jake hadn't been working alone. Someone else had been feeding him information about my company's security protocols. About when I'd be traveling, about which files were most valuable, that someone was David Chen, a senior developer at my company, someone I'd worked with for 3 years, someone I'd trusted. The FBI brought David in for questioning. At first he denied everything, said he barely knew Jake, but then they showed him the evidence. Email exchanges, encrypted messages, bank transfers. David had been paid $15,000 over 6 months to help Jake steal the algorithm. His job was to provide inside information, to help Jake bypass security measures, to identify which files were most valuable. David eventually confessed, said he was drowning in debt. Gambling problem. Jake had approached him at a tech conference and offered him money to help. He said yes. He said he didn't think it was that big of a deal, that everyone in tech steals from everyone anyway. That intellectual property is just an idea, and ideas can't really be owned. The FBI didn't care about his philosophy. They charged him with conspiracy to commit theft of trade secrets. My company fired him immediately, and they sued him too. David's wife left him when she found out. took their 2 kids and filed for divorce, said she couldn't be married to a criminal. David pled guilty to avoid trial, got 3 years in federal prison, lost his house, lost his career, lost his family, all for $15,000. But the revelations didn't stop there. During David's sentencing hearing, something came out that shocked everyone. Emily, my ex-girlfriend, hadn't just been sleeping with Jake. She'd known about the theft. She'd encouraged it. The prosecutors presented evidence, text messages between Emily and Jake. Messages where Emily talked about how once Jake's startup took off, they'd move to New York together, how they'd be rich, how they'd finally be free of boring Daniel and his boring life. She'd known the whole time. She'd been cheating on me with a man who was actively stealing from me, and she'd been part of the plan. The FBI contacted Emily. She was living in New York at the time, working at a marketing firm. They asked her to come in for questioning. She lawyered up immediately. Her attorney advised her not to talk, but the prosecutors didn't need her cooperation. They had the messages, the emails, evidence that she'd helped Jake plan meetings with VCs, that she'd reviewed his pitch deck, that she'd known the technology he was pitching was stolen. They charged her as an accessory. She fought it, claimed she didn't know the code was stolen, that Jake had told her he'd developed it himself. But the messages proved otherwise. She'd written things like, "I can't believe Daniel is so clueless, and when this works we'll never have to see him again." Emily took a plea deal, agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for probation instead of prison time. She had to testify against Jake, had to admit publicly that she'd known about the theft and had encouraged it. The testimony was brutal. She sat on the stand and described how Jake had recruited her, how he'd told her they could be together and be rich if she helped him, how she'd fallen for it, how she'd betrayed me. Her parents were in the courtroom. They looked destroyed. She'd always been the golden child. Stanford graduate, successful career. Now she was a convicted felon. Her company in New York fired her when the news broke. Marketing firms don't keep employees with criminal records for fraud-related crimes. She lost her apartment, couldn't make rent without income. She moved back to California, back in with her parents at 31 years old. Her professional network evaporated. Nobody in marketing wanted to work with someone who'd been convicted of helping steal trade secrets. Her LinkedIn was deleted. Her professional life was over. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd tried to reach out to apologize, that she'd written me letters. I never opened them. I didn't care what she had to say. She'd made her choices. She'd chosen Jake. She'd chosen money. She'd chosen to betray me. And now she was living with those choices. About a year after all the legal proceedings wrapped up, something unexpected happened. I got a message on LinkedIn from Jake's younger sister, Melissa. I'd met her once, briefly at a college party years ago. She asked if we could talk. I was hesitant but curious. We met at a neutral location, a park, public, safe. Melissa looked nervous. She said, "I know you have no reason to listen to me, but I need to tell you something. About Jake, about why he did what he did." I said, "I don't care why he did it." She said, "Please, just 5 minutes." I agreed. Melissa told me that Jake had always been jealous of me, even in college. She said he used to talk about how I was smarter than him, how I got better grades, how professors liked me more, how I'd get amazing job offers while he struggled. She said the jealousy had eaten at him for years. When I'd helped him get the job at my company, he'd been grateful at first, but then he'd watched me succeed, watched me get promoted, watched me work on important projects while he was stuck in entry-level work, and the jealousy turned into resentment. Resentment turned into hatred. He'd started planning to steal from me almost immediately after moving in. The relationship with Emily had been part of the plan, a way to hurt me, a way to take something else that was mine. Melissa was crying by this point. She said, "I'm not asking you to forgive him. I'm not asking you to feel sorry for him. I just wanted you to know that what he did wasn't just about money. It was about trying to prove he was better than you. And when he couldn't do that legitimately, he tried to do it by tearing you down." I said, "Why are you telling me this?" She said, "Because Jake is my brother and I love him. But what he did to you was evil, and I wanted you to know that not everyone in my family thinks what he did was okay. My parents have been making excuses for him, saying he made a mistake, saying the punishment was too harsh. But I know better. He destroyed your life on purpose, and I'm sorry." I thanked Melissa for telling me. It didn't change anything, but it did give me some closure. Jake hadn't just been opportunistic. He'd been malicious. He'd spent 2 years living in my apartment, planning my downfall while smiling to my face. That took a special kind of evil, and knowing that made me feel even better about what I'd done to him. 3 years after Jake went to prison, I met someone new. Her name was Sarah. She was a UX designer at a startup. Smart, funny, kind, the complete opposite of Emily. We'd been dating for about 6 months when I told her the whole story. About Jake, about Emily, about the theft and the trial and the revenge. I expected her to be shocked, maybe even scared. Instead, she said, "You protected yourself and your work. Anyone who says you went too far wasn't in your position." That's when I knew she was different. She didn't judge me for destroying Jake's life. She understood that some betrayals are so deep, so calculated, that the only appropriate response is total annihilation. Sarah and I got engaged a year later. We're planning a small wedding. Just close friends and family. No drama, no hidden agendas. Just two people who choose to be honest with each other. The algorithm I developed eventually became the foundation for a new product my company launched. It's been wildly successful, generated over 50 million in revenue so far. I've been promoted twice since the trial. I'm now a principal engineer, one of the youngest in company history. I make more money than I ever thought possible. I own a house in the Bay Area, which is basically a miracle. I'm happy, actually happy. Sometimes people ask me if I ever think about Jake, if I wonder how he's doing. The answer is no. Not really. He's irrelevant to my life now. He's a cautionary tale I tell to new engineers at my company when we do security training. This is what happens when you steal intellectual property. This is what happens when you betray trust. Your career is over. Your life is over. Don't do it. Jake served his purpose. He taught me that not everyone who smiles at you is your friend. That trust has to be earned and verified. That when someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them. And that when someone tries to destroy you, you have every right to destroy them back. Legally, completely, without mercy. I heard through the grapevine that Jake eventually moved to a different state, somewhere in the Midwest. He's working in IT support at a small company, fixing printer jams, resetting passwords, making $40,000 a year, a Stanford computer science graduate working a job a high school dropout could do, because nobody else will hire him, because his name is poison in the tech industry, because he's a convicted felon with a federal record for trade secret theft. He'll never code again. He'll never build anything significant. He'll never be trusted with anything important. He threw away a promising career because he was jealous, because he couldn't handle watching someone else succeed. And now he gets to spend the rest of his life thinking about what he could have been if he hadn't been so fucking stupid. As for David, the insider who helped Jake, I heard he got out of prison after 2 years, also working a nothing job somewhere, also divorced, also financially destroyed. The last time someone mentioned him to me, they said he tried to get back into tech, applied to a bunch of companies, got rejected from every single one, because a 5-second Google search shows his conviction, shows his mugshot, shows exactly what he did. The tech industry has a long memory. We don't forget. We don't forgive. You steal from us. You're done. Forever. And Emily. Last I heard she was working in retail, some clothing store, making minimum wage, living with her parents, 34 years old, with a criminal record and no career prospects, all because she chose the wrong side, all because she thought helping Jake steal millions would make her rich. Instead, it made her unemployable. I don't feel bad for any of them. Not Jake. Not David. Not Emily. They made their choices. They chose to betray me. They chose to steal from me. They chose to conspire against me, while pretending to be my friends and loved ones. And they paid the price. Every single one of them lost everything. Their careers, their reputations, their freedom, their futures. All because they got greedy. All because they underestimated me. All because they thought I'd be an easy target. They were wrong. And now they get to live with the consequences forever. 5 years after the trial, I gave a talk at a tech conference about intellectual property protection. I told my story. The theft, the investigation, the trial, the convictions. The room was packed. Hundreds of engineers and developers listening as I explained how someone I trusted had systematically stolen my work and tried to destroy my career. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. Afterwards, dozens of people came up to me. Some shared their own stories of IP theft. Others thanked me for being willing to prosecute, for not just letting it go, for showing that theft has consequences. One guy, a CTO at a major company, said what you did sent a message to the entire industry. You can't steal code and get away with it. You can't betray trust and walk away clean. There are consequences, real consequences. Thank you for that. That's when I realized my revenge wasn't just personal, it was educational. It was a warning. It was a statement. Betray someone, steal their work, destroy their trust, and you will lose everything. Not maybe, not possibly, you will. Because the Daniels of the world, the people who actually build things and create value, we don't forget, we don't forgive, and we sure as hell don't let you get away with it. Jake learned that lesson the hard way. So did David. So did Emily. And now their stories serve as warnings to everyone else. Steal intellectual property, federal prison, betray your colleague, career over, help someone commit fraud, criminal record. There's no shortcut. There's no easy path to success, built on someone else's work. You either earn it or you lose everything trying to steal it. That's the reality. That's the lesson. And I'm living proof that justice, when properly executed, is the sweetest revenge of all. 7 years have passed since Jake was arrested in my apartment. 7 years since I discovered the betrayal. 7 years since I made the decision to not just expose him, but to completely and utterly destroy him through legal means. And in those 7 years I've learned something important about revenge. It's not about anger. It's not about hatred. It's about justice. About making sure people face the consequences of their actions. About protecting yourself and sending a message that some lines once crossed can never be uncrossed. My life now is unrecognizable from what it was when Jake lived in my apartment. Sarah and I got married 3 years ago. Small ceremony in Napa, just our closest friends and family. No drama, no hidden agendas, just two people who love and trust each other. We bought a house in Palo Alto, 4 bedrooms, beautiful backyard, home office where I work on side projects. We have a dog, a golden retriever named Code. Sarah named him. She thought it was funny. It is. Work has been incredible. After the trial, my company made me the face of their IP protection program. I give talks internally, train new engineers on security protocols, explain why protecting intellectual property isn't just good business. It's personal. It's about respecting the work, the late nights, the weekends, the years people pour into creating something valuable. I've been promoted 3 times since the trial. I'm now Vice President of Engineering. I lead a team of 40 developers. We're working on next-generation AI systems, stuff that would have seemed like science fiction 10 years ago. And every single person on my team knows my story, knows what happened with Jake, knows that I don't tolerate betrayal or theft. It creates a culture of trust, of honesty, of respect, because everyone knows the consequences of breaking that trust aren't just getting fired, they're federal prison and a destroyed life. The compression algorithm I developed, the one Jake tried to steal, is now licensed to 12 different companies. It's generated over $200 million in revenue. My cut of that has been substantial, enough to never worry about money again, enough to invest, to save, to donate to causes I care about. I've started a scholarship fund for computer science students who've been victims of IP theft, students who've had their work stolen by professors or fellow students. It's a small thing, but it matters. Last year we gave out $50,000 to 10 different students, helped them with legal fees, with tuition, with the costs of fighting back against people who tried to take credit for their work. I also started doing consulting work for law firms handling IP theft cases. I explain technical concepts to juries. I review evidence. I help attorneys understand the nuances of software development and why certain types of theft are more egregious than others. I've worked on 12 cases so far. 10 have resulted in convictions. 2 are still ongoing. Every conviction feels like another small victory, another Jake getting what he deserves, another person learning that stealing other people's work has consequences. Some people in the tech community think I'm obsessed with revenge, that I should have moved on years ago, that I'm still fighting a war that's already been won. They don't understand. This isn't about the past. It's about the future. It's about making sure the next generation of engineers knows they can fight back, that they don't have to accept theft, that there are people who will help them, that justice is possible. About 2 years ago, something surreal happened. I got an email from Jake. He'd gotten my work email somehow. Probably not hard to find since I'm fairly public in the tech community now. The subject line was, "I'm sorry, I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Part of me wanted to delete it immediately. Part of me was curious. I opened it. The email was long, pages long. Jake wrote about how he'd spent 5 years thinking about what he did, how prison had given him time to reflect, how he'd been in therapy trying to understand why he'd made such terrible choices. He wrote about the jealousy Melissa had described, how watching me succeed had eaten him alive, how he'd convinced himself that I didn't deserve my success, that I'd gotten lucky, that if he just had the same opportunities, he'd be just as successful. He wrote about how he'd rationalized the theft, told himself that ideas couldn't be owned, that all code was derivative anyway, that I wouldn't even notice. He wrote about how he'd convinced Emily to help him, how he'd manipulated her, told her they'd be rich and happy if she just played along, how he'd destroyed her life too. He wrote about prison, how brutal it was, how every day he'd wake up and think about how different his life could have been if he'd just been honest, if he'd just worked hard and built his own success instead of trying to steal mine. He wrote about getting out and realizing he had nothing. No career, no money, no friends, no future, just a criminal record and a lifetime of debt. He wrote about working at the call center, how degrading it was to answer phones all day when he had a Stanford degree, how his co-workers had no idea who he used to be or what he'd thrown away, how his parents looked at him with disappointment every single day, how his sister Melissa was the only family member who still talked to him with any respect. He wrote that he'd tried to kill himself twice since getting out of prison, that he'd been hospitalized, that he was on medication for depression and anxiety, that every morning he woke up and wished he'd made different choices. And then at the end of the email, he wrote something that surprised me. He said, "I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I need you to know that what you did was right. I deserved everything that happened to me. The arrest, the trial, the conviction, the prison time, all of it. You protected yourself, you protected your work, and you showed me that actions have consequences. I hate you for destroying my life, but I also understand why you did it. And if I were you, I would have done the same thing." I read that email 3 times. Then I wrote a response, short and simple. I accept your apology, not because it changes anything, not because I forgive you, but because I want you to know that I've moved on. I have a great life, a great career, a great marriage. You have no power over me anymore. You're not my enemy. You're not my rival. You're just a guy who made terrible choices and is living with the consequences. I hope you find peace, but I don't think about you anymore. You're irrelevant to my life. Take care. I hit send. Then I blocked his email address. That was 2 years ago. I haven't heard from him since, and honestly, I don't care if I ever do. Sarah asked me once if I felt guilty about how Jake's life turned out, if I ever wondered whether I'd gone too far, if the punishment fit the crime. I thought about it carefully before answering. I said Jake didn't just steal code. He stole years of my life, years of research and development. He tried to build his entire future on my work. He betrayed my trust while living in my home. He slept with my girlfriend while I was traveling for work. He planned my professional destruction with precision and malice. So no, I don't feel guilty. He got exactly what he deserved, maybe even less than he deserved. Sarah nodded. She said, "Good, because what you did wasn't revenge. It was accountability, and the world needs more of that." I've become something of a minor celebrity in certain tech circles. Not famous exactly, but known. I get invited to speak at conferences, to write articles, to do interviews about IP protection and corporate espionage. My story has been featured in tech publications, in business journals, in case studies taught at law schools. I've been consulted by the FBI on other cases involving trade secret theft. I've helped prosecutors build cases. I've testified as an expert witness, all because I was willing to stand up and fight back when someone tried to destroy me. Some victims of theft don't fight. They're scared, or exhausted, or they don't think they can win. I want them to know they can, that the system when used properly works, that justice is possible. Last month, I gave a keynote speech at a major tech conference. The topic was building a culture of trust in engineering teams. I talked about the importance of protecting intellectual property, of creating environments where people feel safe sharing ideas without fear of theft, of the consequences that must exist when that trust is broken. I told my story. The whole thing. Jake, Emily, David, the theft, the investigation, the trial, the convictions, the destruction of 3 lives that had been built on lies and theft. When I finished, 2,000 people stood up. The applause lasted 5 minutes. Afterwards, dozens of people came up to me. Engineers who'd been victims of IP theft, managers who'd dealt with insider threats, students who'd had their work stolen by professors or classmates. They thanked me for fighting, for winning, for showing them it was possible. One young woman, maybe 25, told me she'd had her master's thesis stolen by her advisor. He'd published her research under his name. She'd been devastated, thought her career was over before it started. But then she'd heard my story. She'd hired a lawyer. She'd sued her university. She'd won, got a settlement, got her advisor fired, got her name on the research where it belonged. She said, "You showed me I didn't have to accept it, that I could fight back. Thank you." That moment made everything worth it. The stress of the trial, the money I'd spent on lawyers and investigators, the emotional toll of reliving the betrayal over and over again in court. All of it was worth it, because it showed other people they don't have to be victims. I think about Jake sometimes. Not often, but sometimes. I wonder if he's still alive, if he's still working that dead-end job, if he's found any peace or purpose. Then I realize I don't actually care. His life, his choices, his consequences, they're not my problem anymore. I did what I needed to do. I protected myself. I sought justice. I won. And now I'm living the life I've built, the life I've earned, the life that nobody can take from me, because I've learned to guard it fiercely. Jake tried to steal my future. Instead, he gave me clarity. He showed me who I could trust, and who I couldn't. He showed me that success makes people jealous, that some people will smile at you while plotting your downfall, that vigilance isn't paranoia, it's wisdom. My team at work is incredible. Smart, talented, loyal. I trust them because they've earned it, because they've proven themselves, because they understand that trust is a two-way street. We protect each other's work. We give credit where it's due. We build together, and when someone tries to steal, when someone tries to take credit for work that isn't theirs, we shut it down immediately. We document everything. We protect our intellectual property like it's sacred, because it is. It's the product of human creativity and effort. It deserves to be protected. Sarah and I are talking about having kids soon. A family, teaching them about honesty, about integrity, about standing up for yourself when people try to hurt you. I'll tell them the story about Jake someday. When they're old enough to understand, I'll explain that sometimes people you trust will betray you, and when that happens, you have choices. You can be a victim, or you can fight back. You can let them get away with it, or you can make sure they face consequences. I know which choice I'll teach my kids to make. The scholarship fund I started has grown. We're giving out $100,000 this year to students who've been victims of IP theft. We're helping them afford lawyers, helping them fight back against professors or institutions that tried to steal their work. Every student we help is another small victory against the Jakes of the world, against the people who think they can take credit for other people's brilliance. I also mentor young engineers now, teach them about protecting their work, about documenting everything, about being vigilant, about understanding that success makes you a target, that people will try to steal from you, and that when they do, you need to be ready. I tell them about Jake, about David, about Emily, about how 3 people conspired to destroy me and ended up destroying themselves instead, about how justice, properly executed, is the sweetest revenge. Some of my mentees have already faced attempts at theft, code stolen by colleagues, ideas taken by managers, work plagiarized by competitors. And because I taught them to document everything, to protect themselves, to fight back, they've won. They've gotten people fired. They've gotten apologies. They've gotten recognition for their work. They've learned that they don't have to accept theft, that they have power, that justice is possible. This is my legacy now, not just the code I write, not just the products I build, but the culture I'm creating. A culture where theft is unacceptable, where betrayal has consequences, where victims become victors, where justice matters. Jake wanted to build his legacy on my work. Instead, he became a footnote in my story, a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when you try to steal someone's future. His legacy is a mugshot, a criminal record, a ruined life. My legacy is success, leadership, justice, a career built on actual work and actual talent, a life built on honesty and integrity, a future that's bright and secure because I protected it when someone tried to take it from me. I won, not just in court, not just financially, but in every way that matters. I have everything Jake wanted and will never have: success, respect, trust, love, freedom, a future, and I earned every bit of it. Nothing was stolen, nothing was taken. Everything I have I built. That's the difference between me and Jake. I create, he steals. I build, he destroys. I earn, he takes. And in the end, that's why I'm here, and he's there. 7 years ago, I was a guy who'd been betrayed by his roommate, his girlfriend and his colleague. I was a victim. Today, I'm a VP of engineering at a major tech company. I'm a husband. I'm a homeowner. I'm a mentor. I'm an advocate for IP protection. I'm a success story. The transformation wasn't easy. It took years of legal battles, thousands of dollars, countless hours of testimony and evidence, and fighting. But it was worth it, because I didn't just get revenge. I got justice. I got vindication. I got my life back. And I made sure Jake, David, and Emily would never do to anyone else what they did to me. That's not cruelty. That's protection. That's service. That's doing the right thing even when it's hard. So no, I don't regret destroying Jake's life. I don't regret the FBI investigation. I don't regret the trial. I don't regret the convictions. I don't regret any of it. Because Jake chose to steal from me. He chose to betray me. He chose to try to destroy my career while pretending to be my friend. And I chose to make sure he paid for those choices. Fully, completely, permanently. That's not revenge. That's accountability. And if more people held betrayers accountable the way I did, there would be a lot less betrayal in the world. Jake learned that lesson. So did David. So did Emily. And now their stories serve as warnings. Betray someone, steal their work, conspire against them, and you will lose everything. Not maybe. You will, because people like me exist. People who won't stay silent. People who will fight back. People who will win. And when we do, we don't just rebuild our lives. We thrive. We succeed beyond what we ever thought possible. Because surviving betrayal and coming out stronger is the ultimate victory. And I am victorious.